Hello, and welcome once again to Age of Wonders Planetfall and the Age of Wonders Planetfall Triceratops Update Patch Notes. My name, as always, is Orange. It's been a while since my last video, always tends to be. Unfortunately, that's just the time we live in. My free time has gone down over the past few months, and what time I do have, I would prefer to play the game instead of making videos about the game, just because that's more fun for me. However, when we have the new DLC and the new patch coming out, the patch notes videos are a little bit easier. A lot of the prep book for them is just to read the patch notes a couple times and then play and see how it feels. Um, Hopefully, I'll get around to making or finishing up the deep dives at least, but I stopped making promises about that because every time I did, I broke them. So we'll see in the future if I can make it happen. But for now, let's just go into it with the Triceratops update. Released in conjunction with the Star Kings DLC. So at the end of the video, if I haven't gone super over on time, I'll do a quick swing through of Oathbound, kind of what the units are, and what my initial feelings about the race are. So, as I normally do with these videos, I'm going to begin by discussing things that are very single-player focused in my mind, um, that I personally just don't care as much about. Now, the vast majority of players for the game are exclusive to the single player mode. They don't play multiplayer. So these are very important updates. They are just not important to me. And I won't talk about them other than just a quick, this is what they are. The big highlight here is the Galactic Empire game mode. Seems, from everything I've heard, discussed about it, to be very attractive and very entertaining to the people that want it. It's not my thing, because again, I just would rather play the game against a human than against the AI. Um, the reasons that I've heard that this wasn't added to the multiplayer side, well, one is balance, obviously, but two, I think they even still tried with the balance issues that might pop up, and they just couldn't manage it because they were getting too many desyncs and connection issues. So that's okay, it happens. I'll enjoy the rest of the game, and the people that wanted the Galactic Empire mode still get it. Good on them. Second thing that is new that is not really going to matter to me is endless research. It's just way too slow. The benefits it can give you can range from okay to extremely strong, but you gotta get past T10 tech. It's way down here. Uh, it's just not plausible in a multiplayer format. So I will never tech that, and I will probably never see it teched against me. But again, I'm glad it exists in the game. There was some complaints that people had that they thought that they were reaching the end of the tech tree and were running out of stuff to do. So now they won't have to run out of stuff to do. Finally, there's kind of been a raft of little miscellaneous UI improvements. These are very important to the single player community and to a certain extent the multiplayer community, but for me, as the player I am, I wouldn't have noticed some of these if they weren't out, like, listed out in writing for me. I just need the game to have a good enough UI to be functional because I enjoy the mechanics. But other people think differently, so that's why some of the stuff continues to happen from patch to patch to patch. And I'm glad that they do that in the game because, again, that's probably the majority of players. I know I'm in the minority in some of this stuff, and they should adjust the majority with what they need. So I actually think that's kind of the last thing I care about, or the last thing that is notable that I don't care about, and I can start transitioning into actually relevant multiplayer stuff. First on the list is a bit of a surprise to me, and that's these residential sectors. I thought that they would fit in kind of the same window as the orbital relays did back in Revelations, I think it was, where they would just come out too late to be relevant, and even once they did, the return on investment wasn't really there. But for the residential sectors specifically, well, first off, they're way earlier in the tech tree. Orbital relays got moved as well, but they used to be like T7 or T5 or somewhere in here. Moving them all the way down to T4 tech makes it a lot more reasonable to get the sectors if you want them. But more importantly than just being an easier tech option is that they come along with these unique racial buildings. And if I was going to advertise this, I would put the buildings as the highlight and the sectors as the, oh yeah, this exists too. Because some of these buildings, man, they're strong. They do two things. One is that they add a new type of colonist slot. Some of these colonist slots can offer you resources that you can't get otherwise, such as influence or cosmite. The other thing they do is if you upgrade this building from T1 to T2 up to the T3 level, the Tier 3 building, each one of them has a unique effect, and some of those unique effects can be very powerful. For instance, you can be getting free animal spawns as the Amazons, or you can get emergent spawns as the Kyoko. Now, the reason that the residential sectors matter is that you need to have a residential sector in order to upgrade the building. And you want to upgrade the building to get more of your unique colonist slot, or to get to your T3 unique effect, which is also strong. I haven't done the math, I don't know anybody that has explicitly done the math. The sector itself is not a great return on your investment in multiplayer. It's just, like, it gives you a benefit. Every pop that's working a normal slot, not one of the unique ones, but the regular ones, produces one more of whatever it would have produced. And that's just not nearly as good as, just building an energy sector or production sector where you get a flat income bonus and you can further specialize into whatever that specialization was, and you unlock the associated building later on down the line to get even better at production or energy or tech or what have you. But you are getting something from the residential sector upgrade, and the effects from the unique racial buildings can be so powerful that you're willing to trade off some of that immediate benefit that you would have otherwise had from a normal sector in order to get this longer term benefit from your racial building. So I think. Again, no one sat down and done the math. I've done a few test games and talked to some other people that have done it. And at least in some cases, I think your economic plan can be you want to rush to residential development, build a few residential sectors, build your colony or your unique racial building, and make that kind of the cornerstone of your approach. Which is good. That's cool. I'm glad that that's become an option in the game. Next down the list, Savage Pteranodon, which it's not actually MP relevant, but I love animals, so I'm glad that we got a new T4 added to the game for free. Where is it? The Infiltrator. The Shakaun Infiltrator has been tweaked. This is more of a quality of life change than a balance change. When you are in a game mode, and it's not always multiplayer, but many single player people I think did this too, you'd like to just be able to auto combat either because you have to in order to keep the game moving, or just because you don't want to fight every stupid fight that you're guaranteed to win with almost no losses. However, with the Infiltrator, their ability to copy other units is the sort of thing that AI is really bad at. And a player is just way more knowledgeable about, okay, this is the sort of unit I want this to be able to transform into, and I will only change it away from that unit in very specific use cases. So in order to prevent people from having to manual to preserve this whatever saved unit they would have had, they just change it so that the Infiltrator won't shift itself to anything aside from what it's already copied in auto combat. Which again, that's a good net change. It's really a quality of life thing. It technically wouldn't matter if everyone was willing to manual every fight, but it's nice that they corrected that, so it's not an issue. Second thing to quick chat about, there's been a couple tactical operation tweaks in what gets used and how often it uses them. Those are under the hood, but tied in with that is this line, which says that you can now decide which operations are accessible for the AI to use in auto combat. This is on top of the fact that you can decide whether or not the AI uses operations, period. I guess in principle you could deselect everything and always leave the other checkbox selected for each individual fight. But really the idea of this is another quality of life thing where there are some operations that you really want to always be used, such as the Amazon Animal Mind Control, the Heriter Spawn Drain operation, the Xenoplague Inflict Parasite Infection operation, and stuff in that vein where you had a strategic level reward in exchange for using a tactical operation. But if you just checked that the AI could use any operation, it often would do the wrong ones, and you wouldn't get any return from the long-term benefit ones because it just won't use them. So now you can try to force the AI to do it. So far, I haven't really noticed this making a huge difference, but it at least makes people feel better that they can pretend to have some influence on what the AI is going to actually be doing. Um, Again, we'll see in the long term if this has actually made a significant difference or not. But in the meantime, it's a nice little quality of life change. Uh, uh, let's move on to these lines. This is something that I don't even know if the single player guys would notice at all, but it's quite relevant to multiplayer. Um, these two lines together mean that you can get to the first level of friendship with an NPC from only completing one quest. It takes you the same amount of effort to get to the second level of friendship, so the long-term difference is there is no long-term difference, but being able to get to that first level very quickly is significant, and the reason for that is in multiplayer, deciding what to do with your NPC faction on your landmark is a very important decision, and historically, the balance of that has always been it's best to just attack them. The first logic there is you can do one quest and then attack them, and you can have your cake and eat it too. You can get the one quest reward, and then you attack them, and you then get the landmark, and then you can get the being at war rewards as you go further on. Now, with this change, after you do that first quest, you're immediately starting to get a lot better return on your investment to stay friendly with the NPC faction. You're getting another influence per turn, which doesn't sound like much, but +1 influence starting turn 2 or 3, that adds up to a whole free unit by turn 2025, which is significant. And it also allows you to do that with multiple factions. So if you want to be peaceful with all your factions, you can be getting +2 or +3 influence per turn from this, as opposed to having to do 2 quests for all of them, which is just way harder to do and takes way more time. So I like this change. I think it's going to at least go some of the way towards evening that balance. I still suspect the optimal decision is always to attack, but this makes it less difficult to decide to be friendly with your NPC faction. You don't feel like you're throwing quite so bad because you're getting some return from that immediately. There has been a very important colonizer change, which is that if you look at Frontier Facilities, this does not give you colonizers anymore. You just get that for free as long as you colonize or your colony is at size 4. This is extremely significant to how the early game plays out in multiplayer because, well, even single player, I suspect the first tech that every single person always takes in this game should be Frontier Facilities to get colonizers, or it was. And it always just felt dumb that you had to do, this 4-turn tech tax before you can really decide what else to do with your game. Now that colonizers come quote-unquote for free from just waiting, the balance of what to take of these 4 is a lot more even. You're still not taking area surveillance because the only thing you really want there is operational effectiveness, and that's a lot later game effect. But of these three choices, your racial doctrines, aquatic deployment, and frontier facilities, that's a real decision now. Most of the races have very strong doctrines. Aquatic deployment makes the clearing stage go a lot smoother and quicker, and if you're next to water, the water sectors can be very strong. And then frontier facilities are just a couple buildings that you're probably going to want in every one of your cities eventually, and sooner rather than later. So it's adding more like relevant decisions to the game, which is something I always appreciate. On the actual like what to do with colonizer side, they did get a little more expensive, but this change also means that if you take colonist cryopods, you can be building a colonizer from turn one, which is a really fast kick in the pants in your economy. That's probably why they nerfed colonist cryopods from 5 to 4 total colonists, but I think it is balanced. I think it's not, the slam dunk best way to approach every given game. Um, and as I said before, I just like how it's adding more decisions into the matrix here that are all relevant to do. It's no longer, yeah, you have to take the tech to get colonizers first, and then the second that's done, you build a colonizer right away. You're still going to be building a colonizer as soon as you can, but now you have this added choice of, do you really think that needs to happen on turn one, or are you willing to wait, two-ish turns for your city to grow one size before you get that colonizer out? Moving on again, there's this list of battlesuit tweaks. So battlesuits are a new tag introduced in Star Kings. Every one of the Oathbound units have it, but that science fiction fantasy of a battlesuit is something that applied to units that already existed in the game. So reasonably, Triumph added that to those handful of units, and then they looked and they must have realized, oh wait, when stuff is battlesuits, the mod compatibility is kind of sucky. So let's add a few things that, now that Oathbound exists, they want access to mods and not to just be limited. And so they had a whole list here, and what's interesting from the patch notes perspective only, and not Oathbound, is now you've added a couple mods to units that couldn't have access to them before. The big flight ones here, I think, are the Bulwark, which now has access to stuff like combat protocol implants, enhanced ling augments, xenograph, well, not xenographed muscles, that's melee only, but jetpack, if you cross-race stuff. Those are very powerful mods to have access to on a, T2 DPS ranged unit. The other one is the Walker, the Vanguard Walker. It's very late in the tech tree, but everyone seems really enamored with the idea of a Walker with a jetpack. And I guess I am too. The jetpack is already one of the very best mods in the game. Certainly the top 2 or 3 that Vanguard have available to them. And it just got that little more flexible and little more utility to be even better. So good on them. I forgot to mention this earlier, I think, directly, but Obla Relays got a couple tweaks to be more useful. One is that you can use them more, and 2 is that they went down in the tech tree by 2 or 3 techs. They're also here at the T4 level, so I don't know if anyone's ever going to rush them explicitly, but they're a viable alternative once you have to decide between these 3 techs. And it means that you might possibly even skip on transit infrastructure. They did nerf that. They did nerf transit infrastructure as well, so that's one ability that the multiplayer community pretty much loathes and the single player community likes because single player guys just want to move around faster. Multiplayer knows how broken moving around faster can be. I think they've reached a kind of happy medium here now where it takes enough effort to get transit infrastructure that it's not a slam dunk. You will get this in multiplayer in every game, but it's still easy enough, and there's other options with stuff like orbital relays that the single player guys don't have to feel like it takes forever to get units around the map. So we talked about battlesuits. There's a couple lines in here that refer to morale. Broken Mind got nerfed, but they also nerfed some of the positive morale sources in the game, popular support, and then invader doctrine, which was a little more limited in use. But morale is one of those things that, if you listen to my other videos, I find to be extremely important in the game. I know a lot of people don't really understand how it works or what effects it has, but I think it's very powerful, and historically, the issue that Planetfall has had that wasn't really one in Age of Wonders 3 is that there are many sources of positive morale in the game and comparatively few sources of negative morale in the game. So every race that one of their benefits is that they have good morale and they can get that extra crit bonus. It just isn't relevant when every race is floating at max morale from just other mechanics in the game that have nothing to do with their special race mechanics. And then everyone's just on this playing field of, oh yeah, we're gonna all be at max morale. So I think by continuing to slowly, and this has been over 2 or 3 patches now, but slowly removing some of this excess positive morale, it's become a little more relevant um, to think about what your morale is actually going to be in a tactical fight um, over time. Again, they did nerf the one of the few sources of negative morale, which would have been Number, but you can stack Broken Mind pretty good as Number, so that's not a huge deal, I don't think. We talked about relay. The next big flight thing here is energy cache got nerfed a little bit as well as colonist cryopods. That's fair. It was energy cache was the best by far. Air to air. So this ties into one of the other kind of big balance concerns that the game had, which is flying units are kind of split into two. There's the flying units that are support based, so stuff like the Mirage, the Propagator, where the unit isn't really, it doesn't deal a lot of damage on its own, but it brings you some neat little flexible abilities that you can do in the game. Those units were fine. The problem units were stuff like the Engulfer, the Ramjet, maybe the Harrier in the later game, where it's a DPS unit that is self-sufficient. It can deal enough damage by itself without support that it can win fights. You combine that with the flying tag, which means that the unit has a lot of strategic mobility, and you have no excuse to build anything else but these guys. And if you wanted to counter these flying units, the only way to do that was to bring along other flying units, because this air-to-air tag that gave accuracy and damage was only on flying units. So you already had an incentive to go towards flying units, but if you wanted to counter flying units, you needed to go with flying units. um, it seems like Triumph identified this as a problem, and they've now made it so most, not all, most of the flyers in the game are not actually good against other flyers, or no better than any other unit. In exchange, they've taken a decent selection of other units in the game and given them this modifier, which turns those units into semi-dedicated anti-air platforms. Most of these are units that make sense. There's a few that don't, like all the snipers have it, but I think really at some point they had to kind of give up flavor in exchange for actual balance here, because they made sure that every unit or that every race had at least one easy to access unit that had this anti-air tag with it. So this will be relevant in multiplayer. In single player, whoops, didn't want to do that. In single player, I don't know how much of an effect it'll have, but I'm glad they did this. This is one of the last, I think, big outstanding things that multiplayer guys had identified as a concern to them. And again, Triumph, as per usual, hears that sort of stuff and tries to address it. We have a few new hero skills. A couple of these, Tireless and First Strike, those are keywords that people may remember from Age of Wonders 3. They do exactly the same thing here. Tireless, you don't lose Overwatch, and First Strike, you hit with your attack in Overwatch before before the enemy hits you, if you're in melee range. I guess it made sense to add those as hero perks, so good that they did that. And then there's a couple boosts to heroes not in a vehicle. this is one that in multiplayer was less of a concern. I think generally you can find enough weapon pickups in the early game from just random stuff that is competitive with vehicles that it was a real decision if you were going to go piloting or not. I had seen in some of the Discord chat that for single player guys who play a little longer games, often it made no sense to take a weapon because the T3 and well, like the one T4 vehicle you had access to, but the T3 vehicles were just so strong that it was best to take those, and then if you do any damage perks or whatever, it works just as well for each side. So now there's a couple perks that level that playing field in that late game scenario. It's possible multiplayer that just means that vehicles are going to be disincentivized, but I'm okay with that. I have no concerns there. They did some doomsday changes that's probably not relevant to multiplayer. Now, as I move into the race by race and secret tech by secret tech stuff, there are a couple kind of global things I want to pull out here that I'm going to skip a lot of them as exact, line by line, but it's something that clearly seems like it was a focus. So one of the ones is lines you see like this. There's a bunch of them where costs were changed. It seems like for the most part, all of the T2 units now have the same production costs, and all of the T3 units have the same production costs. There are still a few exceptions. Don't think I've identified them all because I haven't attempted to find them all. The one that I know of for certain is the Melictor is more expensive than most T3s. That seems fair because it's an insane unit. And there probably are some others that I haven't noticed explicitly, but in general, it looks like all the costs for producing things got re-standardized. The other one is there's a lot of these lines for what does and does not have anti-air. I'm going to skip almost all of those because that's kind of a blanket thing. The one I will note, we'll get to Amazon, but I'm going to skip most of those because, again, that's something we've already talked about as a global change. The other thing that I noticed is a lot of the late game mods seem like they've been tweaked a little bit. Some of the underperformers got boosted up, some of the overperformers got boosted down, or tech swapped, or had some changes there. So that's another kind of little theme, it seems, in this patch, addressing these late game mod imbalances. Was there any other ones? I don't think so. I don't think there was anything else that operated on like a global level to everybody, more or less. So without further ado, I think it's time to go race by race, and we start with the Amazons alphabetically. Scan catalog got nerfed again, I think. No, maybe it hasn't been nerfed. Well, anyways, this was probably a long time coming. I figured scan catalog had always historically been one of, if not the best, single ability in the game. There's contenders to that now because Oathbound exists, but they nerfed it. They gave it a little bit back. Manipulated men can affect mineral units. Amazons are maybe the only race in the game that can consistently get a mineral unit because all the mineral units are double tag animal, so the Amazons could mind control or get a free spawn of the quartzite units, and now the new psionicas as well. So that, I think, was a quality of life change and a slight buff, but I don't think this is killing the Biomancer at all. It's still a phenomenal unit. One of the best supports in the game, maybe the best support in the game for their untech racials. Other tweaks, they nerfed the Bombodon slightly, they buffed the Tranodon slightly, and again, kind of these endgame mods, they did a couple little tweaks, nothing super significant here on the Amazon side of things. Amazon here is now light instead of heavy. Do I think that's going to change too much? It means it is harder to keep flanking out. It won't have access to Blood Fury inducers anymore, but it might gain some other mods. I'd have to think about that. It's probably not super relevant. Moving on to Assembly. Assembly got a significant rework here. They'd historically been considered one of the weakest races in the game and have been for a while. Actually, the weakest race in the game as of since the last patch for certain. And they got a bunch of tweaks to try to address that. So first off, again, it's not listed here specifically, but that new racial building that the assembly have that creates Cosmite is extremely strong for them. It's probably the best ones of those. So, and whereas with the um, starting boons that everybody got in the last patch, Diplodocus, Diplo, whatever. I'm gonna pronounce it wrong. Anyways, the starting boons that everyone else got, that was actually T-Rex. Assemblies was some of the worst ones. They have one of the best buildings, so they're getting some of that back. Other changes that happened is scavengers became a little more survivable, although I think all of the T1 melee units got a little more survivable, so that's not specific to them. However, Electrocutioner got a huge kick in the pants. Um, Significantly more survivable with another defense stat, and fire or projectile blast became much more usable. That's a big deal to have your untech T2 go from not really playable to just straight up quality. Another little hidden change that's kind of among all of them is a lot of their mods got changed from armor to shields. Side damage had always kind of been a real problem for Assembly because they were only had armor as defense stats on all the units and mods, which that's a problem that the Devour and the Vanguard have as well. But the Devour and Vanguard have a lot of mechanical units which carry an inherent psi resist from that tag. Assembly are all cyborgs, and cyborgs don't have any psi resist um, inherent to them. So psi damage would just ignore all of their armor and then also just hit their raw HP without any resist. So getting access to shields is actually really good for them to kind of fix that big gap that they had as a weakness. Finally, we have where are they? Where are they? Their doctrines. So the Assembly T1 doctrines were already probably the best thing about their ace, and then Triumph off them. So their economic game early is nuts now. They have so much research and can just really, really be a problem if you let them go unhindered. Combine that with better scavengers and better electrocutioners, and I think that the issue Assembly have had with the really anemic early game has been addressed, and they can realistically now survive through the early game to let their tech dominance in the late game win it out for them. Um, Obviously, more games have to be played. People won't know, but I would not. I wouldn't assume Assembly are the bottom of the barrel anymore. I think they are going to be very competitive after this whole suite of changes that were given to them. And again, here's another example of the sniper got the air-to-air or anti-air property. Does that make sense? Not really, but um, someone had to have it, and it made more sense on them, I guess, than electrocutioners. The Devour. Interesting here where Trenchers got nerfed very slightly. They deserved it, I think, and the Devour in general deserve it. The other nerf the Devour had was to Siege Master, which was absolutely nuts. +2 damage resistance is a huge number on a hero skill. And aside from that, they got a couple little kind of quality of life things to try to make explosive mods more useful to them. The Ramjet and the Excavator tank, their melee attacks are explosive, so they both already had an explosive ranged attack, and now those mods just work on them, period. It works in everything that they do. So that is a technical buff, but I really think the explosive weapons line has been so crappy that I don't mind that, even if the Devour didn't need the buff in general. And then this, I think, is a quality of life as well, where the Amazons had their terraforming costs massively reduced way back in T-Rex, And someone must have forgot that the Devour also have terraforming operations, so catching up with that. No other big changes here. Kyuko, man, oh man, Kyuko got they got the axe, but I think it was deserved. um, Kyuko have the best racial take in the game with Swarm Shield. Um, there's a couple reasons for that, and just kind of to make it as short as I can, Swarm Shield was almost always just a pure net benefit and very rarely was giving you any minus downside. I generally figure that anything that's shooting in an AoE 1, is going to hit 2 units, just because in PvP fights it's hard to find the space to spread out with 2 hexes of, 2 open hexes in between every one of your units. It just turns out that with the sizes of the map and objectives you have to take and how the defender's going to position themselves, it's really hard to manage that. Which means that your next best option is to reduce it to only hit 2 units at once instead of 3 or 4. Well, with Swarm Shield, you can just match up 2 units side by side and then have that 2 hex gap and 2 more units side by side, and in that particular formation, you're still actually closer together. No, you're just like it's the same split as it would have been if you had a 1 hex gap in between them. So under those assumptions, Swarm Shield had no net negative. You were going to have 2 units hit anyways, and now with Swarm Shield, you just got 2 free shields, period, flat out, for being next to each other like that. The reason this became a problem is because if you look at each Kyoko unit and compare it to its nearest peer, say the Frenzied and the Scav, the Unleashed and the Shrike, the Hidden and Vorpal Snipers, etc., 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 down the line, they were all balanced, assuming that Swarm Shield wasn't up. The Frenzied basically had the same stat line as the Scavenger, with some tweaks, but balancing out to be about the same. Unleashed and Shrikes, Transcendents and Overseers, they didn't assume that Swarm Shield was always up. And so every Kiriko unit just always had 2 extra defense stats over everybody else for nothing. What Triumph has done here is they've basically removed 1 defense stat from all the Kiriko units across the board. There might be one exception here. The Hidden didn't get it, but pretty much everybody else got pushed down by 1, which is still a net gain for them. Because if your Swarm Shield is on, that's +2, and you're then 1 above everybody else. So it really just means that you have to play the Kiriko with the Swarm Shield game in order to in order to be competitive with everyone else. If you don't have the Swarm Shield up, your units are just going to be a little weaker on a unit-by-unit basis. I'm all for this change. I think it's a good one. It is going to make Kyoko harder to play for less skilled people, though, because they're going to have their own, even more so than just what the units themselves would dictate. But because of their racial tag and the weakness that they're going to have overall, they really need to be played in a specific fashion. Notably, Secret Tech units were exempt from this. None of those Secret Tech units got this -1 to any defense stat. I don't know if that's an oversight or if it's just intended that their Secret Tech is still going to be stronger than pretty much everyone else, but I wouldn't cry too hard for Kyoko. They're still extremely strong and going to stay that way. And they also got a couple Secret Tech variant tweaks, just because, including the Phoenix Walker, which got Swarm Shield on it. And their hacker I've seen being used, and it looks insane. Yeah, don't complain for Kyuko. They got nerfed. It wasn't too much. And they can get around the nerf very easily if they want. Shikaron. Again, this line we've already talked about. Otherwise, not too much here. The Firebrand got boosted, and I forgot to talk about this for Assembly. It looks like all of the T3 melee also got a slight survivability buff. To go along with the buff that all of the T1 melee got as well. So I don't know if that was necessary, but I'm not going to complain about it. I love fighting in melee in this game, and every buff that melee gets, good for good by me. Um, this the tactician. Technically, this is a nerf, but I think it really is more of a bug fix or an oversight fix. This is how the Siphoner has worked since at least T-Rex, I think. And they just must not have realized that the tactician didn't work the same way, and so they fixed that. You can't just keep resetting the same unit, to have three actions, reset at Themo actions, reset at Themo actions, all in the same turn. You gotta wait. Which yeah, that's justified. That's broken. They also nerfed Call Insider, which is Call Insider is still probably the best hero skill in the game, because at least for when you have access to it. But not being able to infinitely keep spawning units is something that seems intelligent, like an intelligent change. Syndicate got a couple different changes. They were a big one that some of their endgame mods got tweaked significantly. I They still have the issue that if you look at their tech tree for Syndicate Military, should have done military first. They still have this kind of window in here where it's very easy to have mods that you just can't use. Obviously, spatial acceleration is only good in mirages, so military dominance here is very often just a dead tech if you ever want to go further down their mod line. But even, preventative control, you might not use either of these too much, although sideballs are pretty good. And then in here, these aren't bad, but a T6 tech to get universal camouflage is not super great. Control amplifier can be extremely powerful, but you need to have a setup where you're using Overseer and Indentured, and that's not guaranteed. So they still have some problems, but they're accessibility problems now. I think these other, the mods at the very end of the line that got adjusted, I was certainly better now. Actually, Adaptive Camouflage was one that got adjusted. I don't know what it did before, but that's a pretty good defense buff. Anyways, tweak some of the endgame mods. The hover bike was something that I know people had always been complaining about. In the games I personally play, I haven't seen too much of it, but um, this is another one where I think they um, made a change in accordance with something that was already in the game, and they must have just forgot how this works, because I believe this is how the Deadeye works on its AoE attack, that it rolls on every single tile. Um, and now you can't just with a hover bike shoot in front of cover and guaranteed hit the guy behind cover when you ground attack. Syndicate's number got nerfed a little bit, probably deserved it. And I think that's it for Syndicate, so overall they did alright. But I don't know if any of this stuff I talked about directly is super relevant, other than the hover bike change. I think the rest is all just too late to matter too much. Vanguard, they are the other ones alongside Assembly that got a pretty significant kind of soft rework here. I didn't think Vanguard were all that bad, but they were probably lower half. I think Assembly were worse than everybody else by a bigger gap than anybody else was apart from anybody else. So I don't mind that Vanguard got buffed, but they didn't need like a huge drastic changes. On the flip side, though, they got a huge hit from nanite injectors. So this is another thing that happens with Vanguard a lot, where their very best stuff has been so good, they nerf it really hard and then make all their other stuff that wasn't as good a little bit better to try to compensate, so that nothing is like super strong powerful. But nanites with free action to leave one is a significant change. It used to be you could just, pre-fire it for free and then move in, observe a bunch of Overwatch and stuff. Now that's a harder decision to have to make. On the flip side to that, Owls got buffed, pugs got buffed, assault bikes got buffed, engineers got buffed. Engineers got buffed twice because they actually buffed the gun turret too. Gunships got nerfed, I guess. Laser tanks got buffed. Walkers got buffed. So they got a bunch of small upgrades across the board to make up for their, flagship mod getting hit so hard. They also got a brand new doctrine. They swapped some stuff around, got rid of one of the doctrines no one ever cared to use. And then they added this new T5 doctrine, Shock and Awe, which makes their explosive attacks scale a little bit better into the late game. And it makes grenades actually really scary. Not just the grenades that they start with on their troopers, but all the grenade mods have become significantly more scary under the Vanguard. So that's pretty cool. It's something that's really unique to them. Usually those grenade mods I find to kind of not be worth the cost, but I think specifically for Vanguard that's probably not the case anymore. And I'll distract myself for a second here to talk about when they moved around a couple of these texts. The one that I forgot to discuss was Dawn of the New Union got moved from here down to here. That means that now you can go bang, 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 and you have a lot easier access to the T5 doctrines. Historically, no one's ever gone for those because you were forced to take Dawn of the New Union first. And it just, none of these doctrines were worth the cost of a T4 tech and a T5 tech to have access to. Now you can get them and just entirely skip a T4 tech in the process. That's very good for the races that have good T5 doctrines. Not everybody does, but that means that this Shock and Awe is actually reasonable to acquire now in a multiplayer game. And in fact, by the time you get it, it's going to be right about the time that you're going to want that boost. So very, very solid boost to them, I think. And overall with the races, as per usual, in a Triumph patch, I think the guys that were bad got better, and the guys that were too good got a little bit worse. Nothing here really that I disagree with. Obviously, there's always things I would love to keep asking for, but I can't fault what was done. I think, the big winners obviously are Assembly and Vanguard. Syndicate had, some stuff get boosted, but it's a lot of stuff that's kind of in awkward positions or late game enough that it's not going to be a huge deal. Kirko, they took a really big hit, and it was deserved. Devour didn't take as big of a hit, even though it probably would have also been deserved for them. Hopefully we'll see that they get one more yet. And then Amazons just keep going, and Shikang keep going, as per usual. Moving on to the secret techs. Celestian, I think, the most cost-effective change in the game. They only have one line, but man, is it significant. The Lightbringer. Usually, it's kind of been derogatory words have been spoken, that it's underperformed, but it's now real scary. Being able to dash and then still have an action point is a huge difference from a full action dash, which puts you out in the middle of nowhere without defense mode to just get exploded. Now you can either Alpha Strike after you dash in to try to remove units from the board, or you can pop into defense mode to try to live, or if you have some utility mod that does weird stuff on it, you can use the mod right away. It just makes them much more flexible in that, all-important engagement turn, which, again, historically has been a problem for the Lightbringers, that they can dash in and then they all just die because they didn't quite deal enough damage to actually kill anything, and then they're just entirely vulnerable out in the middle of nowhere, unsupported. So, very good buff for Celestian. Even though it's just one thing that changed, it was a very crucial thing. Herder, on the other hand, have started to get some very well-deserved nerfs. Drained have been absolutely nuts in their damage output as a, T.75 unit. Being able to just endlessly scale damage was crazy. And not just damage, not percentage. This is raw damage, which meant any percentage modifiers worked on this raw damage, which is something that only one other unit in the game gets a unit type, and that's the Syndicate sign number combination, and that also has been nerfed, and those numbers were already way, way lower than what the Drain had access to. So removing that ability from Empowered Drained and from the Drained level ups is very deserved, I think, in my opinion. Um, for some reason, apparently the Siphon and Quintessence Arc were cheaper than the normal unit for their tier. I don't know why, but that's been fixed now, and I'm glad for it. Um, and then they had a couple little quality of life changes here on Condemned to Drain and Quintessence Arc to make them a little bit easier to use, which is fine. They started to work now, I think, on the actually overpowered stuff. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more. I still think Drain are going to be too good because of their mind control access, but this is a good start. Herido's been looking for a nerf for a long time. Promethean got a line here that really only matters to Shikaun, but it's a cool line regardless. Hazmat protection became less of just a total meme. It gives, some just generic general utility now, as opposed to only screwing over biochemical attacks. Backlash projectors, man oh man, did they get a buff. Again, as part of this kind of late game mod balancing that it looks like has been going on. Um, and then Phoenix Rising got moved up from tier 9 to tier 10. I think actually that line is backwards if I recall correctly. Um, yeah. And I think it went from T10 to T9 because that puts them in line with like Void Tech is like that. Synthesis is a T9, so that's just a tweak to balance where the tech should always probably have been from the beginning. And then a hero skill change, which those are always nice, not always super relevant. No issues with Promethean either. Cynumbra, again, we already talked. The Syndicate Cynumbra specifically got nerfed. They also nerfed Broken Mind specifically. And they nerfed Echoes of Despair, which were another really powerful early game tool from Cynumbra. And they nerfed Mark of the Dark Sun, which it's still a phenomenal mod, right? I think a mod that just says plus 20% that's available from the very first tech of the game if you want, that alone is worth putting on a bunch of stuff. But when you were able to very quickly, with just one kill, go from plus 20% to plus 40%, that became nutty. So you can still technically scale this really, really high, but it's harder to do it on the majority of your army, and it's going to be a slower process besides. So still a very strong mod, still, very front-loaded power, but not so overbearing dominant. So yeah, nerfs for Cynumbra pretty solid, which I guess that's okay. I didn't think Cynumbra was too beyond the pale, but giving Psy access to races that didn't have Psy access is always nuts, and giving better Psy units to the races that have access to Psy weapons tree mods is also pretty nuts. So I don't complain if Cynumbra gets nerfed a little bit. It's still going to be very playable in everything that they're trying to do. Synthesis has some very interesting mix of things here. So they're kind of one of the main tweaks here for endgame mod stuff. TNI got flipped way, it got switched with Deploy Melwood Daemon. It's still an amazing mod, one of the best in the game, but it's no longer gating one of the mods that isn't the best in the game. And Deploy Melwood Daemon is okay. I haven't had a chance to try it yet to see if I think it's worth going for on its own right or not, but it's more likely to be gone for here than when it was way down here as a T9 tech. They also buffed the Avatar, which is a unit that needed it, and the network link got... I don't know if this is a buff or no, if it got changed. You can't hit other network links with the action reset. which is intelligent. That's a good change and a nerf. They also reduce save state daemon, which is also a nerf. But network links can now extend the duration of subroutines. Subroutines are the battlefield-wide operations down here that were already extremely strong for synthesis and are one of the reasons that you go for the secret tech in the first place. So I don't know. Again, technically it's a no for the network link. I think they're less exploitable, but I don't think they're like a weak unit by any means. And they now tie in even more with the game plan that Synthesis have of just get a lot of units, put good mods on them, and use good ops to further make them better, which has always been a solid game plan. So, interesting set of changes for Synthesis. I would say overall, they lost a couple things that were overbearing, but they gained some of that back right away again. I still suspect they're going to be one of the better secret techs in the game. Moving on to Void Tech, Quantum Avatar took a pretty big hit here. Definitely deserved it. It's still phenomenal. Dimensional Rift. What is Dimensional Rift? I think that must be their What is Dimensional Rift? Oh yeah, that's their Doomsday. Alright, no worries. So that's not super relevant. Stasis Pocket Inducer got nerfed. So yeah, couple nerfs to endgame stuff for Void Tech. Nothing severe and both deserved. Xenoplague, increased applicability to the Vanguard now that Plague Pods are grenades. Hyperaggression got massively buffed. Holy cow, that's scary. They continue to buff Parasitic Symbiosis. What's it up to now? This is the second or third time they buffed it. Plus 20 hit points. And at a T2 mod cost. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, the issue that Xenoplague have, and it's the same issue that they've always had, is that if they ever lose a big fight, they can't build their units again. Because they depend on free spawn. So once stuff dies, it's just gone. They can't build their good, plague loads or even destroyers. They just have that element of luck in there that really just hurts them once their initial rush stage goes away. They're so good at building up an army, but if they lose that, then their game is just over. But it seems like they're trying, or Triumph is trying to fix that by making their endgame mods be a little above par. That might be good enough. Especially since their units already cost less tech than anybody else's, right? The Pustule can start spawning immediately, and then the Destroyer and Plague Load are at T4 and T6. If I compare that to, say, Voidtech here, it's T5 and T8, and there's another another unit here at T3, so significantly cheaper tech for the Voidtech units. So you can reasonably go bang, 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 and then just start working your way down the mod line, and you're still going to have your mods online before or around the same time that anybody else would, because you haven't given up too much to get a unit on the way. So maybe that might be enough. I need to do more Xenoplague games. I need to do more games with everything. I love all these changes. Everything's been real impactful, I think. As far as like overall in the secret text, I mean, again, same verse here as with the races, where nothing here seems out of line. There's nothing that I outright disagree with. There's a couple of things I maybe would have liked to see. Herod, I think, is still going to be too good. Voidtech looks to be still pretty good. There's a couple units that didn't get changed at all. And I still really would love to see, hopefully someday, a little bit of racial variance with the mechanical secret tech units that we don't have any right now. Other than, like, now I guess there's 3 types of Phoenix Walker, but you don't have any cool Amazon animals for the T2 mechanical or T3 mechanical stuff. You don't, like, you have all these void tech units that use arc damage or physical firearm damage that doesn't really always apply to all races equally. So I don't know. Hopefully we'll see that stuff someday. Maybe there'll be some big last patch. If this is, if this is the last DLC, which it sounds like it is. But anyways, yeah, no complaints for Secret Tech. No complaints on what was done. And I try not to whine about what hasn't been done because I know that they're working hard, and if the game's done, I mean, that's just what it is. Moving on now to weapons tech. Actually, quite a few changes in all these weapon techs combined here. Many of which I think are as part of this looking at endgame mod stuff. So you have Arcstorm, Paladin Discharge Shield, Blightworm, Blightbringer. These are all endgame things that just didn't perform extremely well. And they've changed that. Biochemical specifically I'll pull out as it really struggled because its endgame stuff could only hit biological and cyborg units, but by the time you get these mods out, there's just not a lot of biological and cyborg units on the field for many races. So making those more flexible should go a long way to making those mods just better. And, I think the effects had always been good. It just wasn't good in enough scenarios to ever justify going for it, especially for when it's end cap mod. So hopefully that'll go a long way towards fixing biochemical. And again, a couple of these other arc mods that just didn't seem like they were up to par. This is a neat little change. Cerebral Strain. It's still going to be extremely specialized in what it does, but at least now it can hit Herder as a secret tech and Oathbound Seers, which is not irrelevant in and of itself either. A couple buffs to explosive stuff. I still think explosives is a weak weapons tree, but it's not the fault of the mods. The problem with explosives is that there just aren't enough units that want it. Some of that's gotten a little better now, I think, with the change to ramjets and excavator tanks. But if rocket artillery was their T2 unit, like instead of the bulwark, it would be entirely different. You'd see explosives come out of the woodwork. It'd be amazing. But it's just too slow, and they just don't have enough. The mods are all balanced assuming repeating attacks, and they just don't have a lot of repeating attack explosive units. Couple changes to some of the NPC faction units here. The Guard got boosted. Blech, I can't talk today. Vinebuds got boosted a little bit. Autonom got nerfed slightly, and then the Spacers, Psycho, and Helicopter got boosted a little bit. Again, none of this is super relevant, but the units are going in okay directions. I don't know if the Guard needed the buff, but as I said before, I like when melee units get buffs, so I'm not going to complain about it. The Vinebud probably did. Did need the buff. Psycho probably needed it. Helicopter probably needed it, so good stuff there. Therians took the axe. The Bouncer was way too good, so they nerfed some of its damage output and some of its survivability, but it's still just going to be a extremely mobile, pretty survivable, well moddable unit. I don't expect the Bouncer to vanish from play. I think it's still very good. Camus took a smaller nerf, but it didn't need as big of a nerf, so that was fine too. And then injectors now cost Cosmite, which definitely needed to be a thing. They were just too strong, so slowing them down is slowing them down is good. But finally, we have a couple tweaks to wildlife units and hero weapons. Nothing really specific to talk about here other than the Shepherd got boosted to be a little more in line with its tier. So if anyone remembers, the Shepherd originally was a T2 unit until it became obvious that was broken because that was easy to mind control. and then a mind-controlled Shepherd could do just absolutely insane things. So the Shepherd went from T2 to T3, but then it never really got boosted to be the T3 stat line, even though it was in stacks as a T3 power level. So just kind of putting it back to where it should have been from a patch or two ago. As far as the fixes, I don't think there's anything especially notable here that I wanted to talk about. There really is. Let's check time. We are at an hour. Let's very quickly go through Oathbound just to look at their units. So, Oathbound are a very, very melee-focused faction. They're kind of like the Kyoko or the Amazons or the Assembly, except this time Triumph really means it. These are the melee faction. They don't really cater at all towards a standoff playstyle. Their support units have range available, but they don't have a lot of ways to boost offensive capability in and of themselves, and really are clearly designed to be supporting a melee front line. So starting with the Scout, they have the Scryer. Its stat line and use in combat is kind of similar to what the Inspector is. It's pretty anemic damage. It's not especially survivable by Scout standards, but Gift of Precognition gives it something to do in a support role. It might be one of the best Scouts in the game to just have one or two along in most fights, because at least every other turn you're going to be able to give this Precognition stack, which I generally figure is something on the order of 8 to 12 damage healed. Healed in quotes there. Which is very good. Probably a little stronger than the Assembly Inspector, but not too bad. It's about in line. Aspirant is a very scary T1. I've seen a few people try to say that they don't like this unit, they think it's weak, and I think they are full of it. It has the new and improved T1 defensive stat line. If I look at the Frenzied here, 15. Oh, that's actually, well, 15-2. So the Frenzied is a little bit more defensive than this guy is, but it has against all odds, which makes up for that once it gets in range. It also has a shields up defense mode. So this guy all by itself can be 45 and 4, which is T2 stat line effectively on the engagement turn. It has a single action attack combined with First Strike in melee Overwatch, so this guy cheats out a lot of damage in actions. It has another single action, strong secondary ranged attack. Not super long range, but better than a shotgun, I believe. I think it's slightly less damage and no high impact, but it doesn't have the same ranged fall off. Something like that. Anyways, the Aspirant can Alpha Strike just like nuts. And really the only weaknesses it has is that there's not a lot of ways to give it stagger resistance, and it doesn't have fast movement. But if you know what you're doing, this unit can destroy people. And part of the reason it can do that, I'm going to go down to the Paladin Protector. This guy here is the actual hard carry of the Oathbound. 45 and 5. That's the best stat line, I think, just about of any T2 unit for defenses. I think, yeah, I don't think anybody's better. You can maybe try to make the arguments of the Amazon plant unit whose name I forget. But yeah, it's pretty good. It only has a melee attack, but that melee attack can hit flying, so that removes the one big problem that melee units historically have had. And it has a AoE defense mode, which is not unique, but for a melee-based faction that has access to some very strong mods that also want you to clump up, it just becomes overbearing very quickly. It also has this massive AoE heal, which is just nuts. 15 in an AoE 2 is one of the best heals in the game, period, flat out from any source. So, extremely strong unit. I would expect that the Aspirant and probably the Protector are both going to see a nerf coming up here. Their untech support unit is the Auger. It has a couple of interesting little abilities here. So the normal stat line, normal offense attack stat line, nothing special there. But its heal, quote unquote, is Gift of Adamance, which is actually gives Last Stand for a turn, and then heals for 20. So it's not a cleanse, and it's a little bit less overall heal than I think most of the other racial healers are. But it gives you that one round of, invulnerability to maybe pop Overwatch or just be very aggressive in your positioning, and the other guy can't really address that unit. So interesting heal. I think we're still seeing the potential of what that can all do. I don't. Well, it's also range 7, which is the other crazy thing. I think that's by far the longest range of any of the other heals in the game. Then there's Curse of Fatalism, which is its kind of off utility ability. Fatalism is extremely strong. It's debatably broken when you combine it with insta-kill operation. Well, not debatably. It is broken when you combine it with insta-kill operations. Aside from that use case, I don't think it's as powerful as some people make it out to be. If you remove insta-kill from the equation, 100% easier to hit often doesn't matter very much. Usually I figure that players are only going to take high accuracy shots anyways. So, if you were going to do an 80% shot and now you're going to do a 100% shot, really you only have that marginal gain. Failing all resistance checks matters a little bit more, but not like horrifically more. And I believe Fatalism's cleansable too. So the Auger is very strong. Fatalism's also on a long cooldown. Really, the issue that is arising with the Oathbound is just that they have such a dominant turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 that you just can't make up for it afterwards, right? So turn 1, they have precognition and everything, so a bunch of defense. They clump up together, get all their defense modes up. Turn 2, they pop Curse of Fatalism on a couple things, and they just all move up, kill those couple things, and no one can really, hit them back because they're still really defensive, and they've removed a whole bunch of actions from the opponent. And then they're already in melee, and fighting a melee race in melee is a losing game for most people. So yeah, the Auger definitely contributes to that, but I don't think the Auger itself is really a problem child. Moving on from there, I think the Warden comes next. This is an interesting unit. It kind of fits in the same bucket as something like the Assault Bike or maybe the Lightning Rider, where it's not obvious when and how to use it. I think it's strong. I think it might even be very strong, but whenever you're in when you want to build Wardens, you need to be planning around building Wardens. It's never going to be a unit you just decide to throw a couple in your setup, because it just won't fit in a lot of builds. You have to build around it and not have it fit around something else. I think that makes sense. But it's another archer unit. We don't have too many of those in the game aside from the Huntress. Single action, which is also very scary. Single actions can historically be abusable, but it doesn't get the extra +1 range that Huntresses get, which balances out a little bit. Pretty tanky. Warden's Banner it's a damage-only long-range grenade that gives, long-term upside. But if you start stacking enough Wardens up, that AoE damage can also really add up pretty quickly. So again, that's nothing wrong with that. It's pretty good. And the defense mode is a neat little... It seems like they're trying to give a unique defense mode to all of the Paladin units. Not the Seers, but the Paladins. So... Oh, this one's missing. I have to let somebody know that. But interesting unit, like I said, for the Warden. It's not something that's obvious. It's also got Overwatch. I don't know when the hell whatever that's going to be relevant. Anyways, from the Warden, I believe the next one is the Watcher, which is actually their flying unit. Um, Definitely a support. Again, all the seers are supports, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference from the Auger to the Watcher. It's not just because they have that same green robe, but Watcher has a unique attack in that it's a default jump attack, not a repeater, not a single action. Not too many other units that do that. I think the Avatar might be the only other one that does it natively. It also has Gift of Providence as a utility ability, which is nuts. Having some other unit always critically hit. If you combine that with, say, Herald or Siphon or Actioner resets, or if you put it on a Sniper, or if you put it on, any one of these big giant single action attack units, this can essentially read, plus 15 damage or something, which is a big deal. And then Lash of Adversity is a defensive tool. Giving it on 3 units at once is pretty strong, but making all attacks fumble is a 50% damage 50% damage reduction, which definitely matters, and it's a no check. A stack of Watchers, I think, will typically lose against a stack of anything else, but they're going to be really annoying about it. And bringing a few of these along in a support capacity is going to be really good force multiplication. Just your damage output went way up, their damage output went way down, and you still have this utility attack where if you mod this guy up with entropy mods, you can further annoy the piss out of whoever you're attacking. So I like the Watcher. I think it is in a more balanced state, and just in general, I think all the Seer units are in a more balanced state than the Paladin ones. And I'm excited for a flyer that has such a neat little use case, utility case here, as a kind of pure debuffer almost, with 1 Gift of Providence. Next one up, I believe, is the Champion. It's the first T3 flyer in the game, which is a really scary thing to talk about. It is melee. It's got a giant single action attack, and the defense mode is busted, but the defense mode gives it tireless, which means that you swoop in with this guy using its engage, its 9-range engage, and then everything that is next to it or under it will eat an Overwatch hit before it can do anything. Well, not before, because it doesn't have Foe Strike, but everything that's under it will continually take hits while the champion is not staggered or while the champion is not dead, because just because it hit once with Overwatch hasn't removed its Overwatch. Like the Espen, it has against all odds to make it a little more evasive, a little more survivable. I still think this guy is going to be an Alpha Strike glass cannon sort of deal, until you can really start massing them up and put the great Oathbound mods that like to be next to each other. I love the idea of this unit. I don't know where it sits balance-wise, because I hear the words T3 Fire, and that makes me terrified. And knowing how strong the lower level stuff of Oathbound can be in my testing to date, I hope that this won't also be too good, because I would like it to kind of just be fine, because I want the unit to exist as it is. We'll see. The Diviner is the T3 support, comes after the Champion. It's another Seer unit, obviously. Another unique attack. It comes with AoE 1 by default. That's a little more common than a jumping attack. Has 3 abilities. One of them is an AoE precognition. Another one is an AoE fatalism. Both are very strong. It basically does what the Watcher does, except more and better. Well, no, it's a combination, right? Because the Watcher is adversity. So it has the damage increase of the Watcher combined with an additional damage increase from the Auger, both of which happen in an AoE. this is this is a killer. It's a support unit that specializes in pure, utter damage improvement, either by debuffing or buffing. And then it also has a res, because why wouldn't it have a res? I don't know where this guy sits either. It's so late in the tech tree that I just will never see it. Historically, the base game races that had a T3 support, those have not been very good. The Shakaran Tactician was pretty good, or has been considered pretty good. The Diviner is going to be in a similar boat where once you can get it, it's a very good unit, but I don't think it's good enough by itself to win you the game. The Champion might be good enough to do that. I don't think the Diviner is. But I do think you won't mind grabbing this guy when and if that becomes plausible and however you're playing. Finally, we have the Exemplar. I'll skip some of the other stuff further down the line. Exemplar is a Tifo. I love the aesthetic of this guy, and I love the mechanics of this guy. I hope someday to build one. I never get to play with Tifos, but I really want to play with this one. It has a mode switch where it starts out as this just giant, super tanky, melee, chunky boy, but then it can throw its shield to one of its allies, and then it just becomes this, diving, aggressive, blitzing dude that rolls on in, hits a bunch of dudes, and then grabs its shield back and becomes tanky again. With all the Tifos, I love the concept of this one specifically, but I will almost certainly never see it either to play with or against, just because it's so expensive to get that far down the tech tree. But again, it fits in with my general view on the Oathbound, which is they have amazing aesthetics. Some of their early stuff has, I think, too strong of mechanics. They just are a little bit too tanky across, quite a bit too tanky across the board. And then this whole fatalism lets you insta-kill people for free thing. I would expect that one or both of those will be addressed relatively quickly. And I can understand why those wouldn't have been caught right away, because I think in single player, you won't necessarily notice those issues being quite so overbearing. But if you ever have to play against these guys, it's just nuts how they have answers to anything. They're tuned as if melee was weak, and melee isn't weak. Melee is strong. So they don't need to be better than the other races at stuff just because they don't have range. Like, that's not a real weakness. Anyways, that was the Oathbound, which already came in the Star Kings DLC alongside this patch. I believe I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And so with no further ado, I've definitely been enjoying the stuff that's come out so far. I hope this isn't the end. Again, I believe word on the street from a dev or something is that Star Kings was the last planned DLC. Hopefully we'll at least see one more decent sized patch that can have a little bit of more toys to give everybody. But if this was the last one, I'm fine with that. The game is in a very good spot. I think with maybe a few more balance tweaks to Oathbound, I won't really have anything to complain about. That's serious. I can always find reasons to complain for stuff I care about. But nope. Again, Planetfall remains an amazing game. Love the flavor that oozes out of everything. I love the mechanics and just the creativity involved. And I thank Triumph for making it and giving me more toys to play with. So, with all that being said, thank you for watching up to this point, and as always, enjoy Planetfall.